The grocery store was unusually quiet for a Saturday afternoon. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow over the polished floors and neatly arranged aisles. Shoppers moved about with carts, absorbed in their own worlds, until a sudden burst of shouting cut through the silence. "You think you're better than us just because you're alone with a kid?" one of the voices snarled, filled with mockery and aggression. All eyes turned toward aisle 7. There, a young woman stood frozen, clutching a toddler to her chest. Her eyes darted nervously between two men who loomed over her, smirking with the arrogance of those who thought they were untouchable. Her cart was tipped on its side, its contents scattered across the floor: boxes of cereal, canned soup, a pack of diapers. The toddler began to cry. What no one noticed, at least not yet, was the elderly man standing just a few steps away. He wore a simple gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. His back was slightly hunched with age, and his salt and pepper beard gave away decades of hard-earned wisdom. But there was a presence about him, a quiet intensity in his eyes, a stillness that felt dangerous. Before we dive into what happens next, if you've ever felt powerless in a world that doesn't seem fair, listen closely. The man you're about to meet made a choice that changed everything, not just for someone else, but for himself. And sometimes, one decision can trigger abundance in ways you never imagined. If you're ready to reclaim your power, attract abundance, and unlock something truly life-changing, I highly recommend checking out the Manifestation Code 369. It's a simple but powerful method that's helping thousands of people shift their reality, fast. You'll find the link in the first pinned comment. But hurry, access is limited and the opportunity may not be available for long. If you're watching this now, it's probably for a reason. Now, back to the story. His name was Walter Green. Once, he was known as the Hurricane, a force to be reckoned with in the MMA world, feared for his precise strikes and unshakable composure. But that was a lifetime ago. Now in his late 60s, Walter lived a quiet life, mostly invisible to the world around him. He walked with a slight limp from an old injury. He shopped alone. He rarely spoke unless spoken to. To most people in that store, he was just another old man with a tired expression and a slow gait. But Walter saw everything. He saw the fear in the young mother's eyes. The way she placed her body between the bullies and her child. The way no one else moved to help. He could feel the familiar surge rising in his chest, not anger, not yet. But something older. Something deeper. The quiet voice that once guided him inside the octagon, was whispering again. The first man, tall, lean, with a baseball cap turned backward, laughed and picked up a can of soup. "What, nothing to say now? Thought you single moms were all independent and tough." The second, bulkier, with a thick beard and a cruel glint in his eye, kicked the woman's cart further down the aisle. "Maybe she needs someone to teach her how the world really works." People watched, but no one moved. They stood at the ends of the aisle, pretending to check their phones, pretending not to see. The kind of silence that screams complicity. Walter stepped forward. At first, no one noticed. He walked slowly, deliberately, as if still deciding what to do. But inside, he wasn't deciding. He had already made up his mind. He stopped just beside the scattered groceries, between the mother and the men. The taller one looked at him and scoffed. "What's this? Grandpa gonna give us a lecture?" Walter didn't blink. His voice, when it came, was soft. Calm. Deadly calm. "You've got 2 seconds to apologize and leave." The two men exchanged a look, half disbelief, half amusement. The bulkier one took a step closer. "Or what?" Walter's eyes didn't waver. "One." They laughed. And then it happened. Faster than anyone could process, Walter's hand shot out, grabbing the can of soup from the first man's grip and tossing it aside. In the same motion, he stepped in, twisting the man's wrist and dropping him to one knee with a forceful, precise movement that made it clear, this wasn't random. This was skill. Years of it. The bearded man lunged forward, but Walter sidestepped, using the man's own momentum to slam him against the shelf. Cans clattered to the floor. The impact left him breathless. Gasps echoed from the onlookers. Some even pulled out their phones. But none intervened. No one needed to. Walter didn't throw a single punch. He didn't have to. The two men scrambled to their feet, backing away, suddenly unsure of everything. Their bravado had vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. "This ain't over," one of them hissed, still clutching his arm. Walter stared at them. "You're right. It's not. Because if I see you near her again, it'll end a lot worse." They retreated, bumping into shelves and carts as they stumbled away. Walter turned to the mother, who was still shielding her child, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice suddenly gentle. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I think so. Thank you." He knelt down, picking up a box of cereal from the floor and placing it gently back in her cart. Some people forget their strength. But it's always there. You didn't freeze. You protected your child. That takes more courage than most. Before she could say anything else, Walter turned and walked away, leaving a trail of whispers behind him. No one quite knew who he was. But everyone knew what they had just seen. And Walter? He wasn't looking for thanks. He never was. He had simply seen something wrong, and done something right. News travels fast, especially when it's caught on camera. The video didn't take long to go viral. Someone had recorded the entire scene, from the moment the bullies started harassing the young woman, to the exact second Walter Green stepped in and changed everything. It was shaky, grainy cell phone footage, but it didn't matter. You could hear the tension in every word. You could feel the shock ripple through the bystanders. And when Walter moved, when he took control of the situation without a single wasted motion, the internet took notice. Old man drops two bullies in a grocery store. Elderly ex-fighter protects single mom like a true hero. Real-life action movie scene caught on camera. Within hours, Walter's name was trending. People were asking, who was this man? But Walter didn't care. He didn't even know about the video, not yet. He was home by the time it started spreading, sitting in a quiet kitchen, heating up leftovers in a microwave that beeped just a little too loud. The walls of his apartment were bare, except for one photograph, a younger version of him in a worn-out gym, fists raised, sweat pouring, eyes focused. Back when he was still the Hurricane. But that life, it felt like it belonged to someone else. Walter had walked away from the cage years ago, after one final fight that ended with his knee torn and his opponent unconscious. He didn't leave because he was defeated, he left because he was tired. Tired of the violence. Tired of fighting for entertainment. Tired of becoming a spectacle. So he disappeared from the spotlight, moved to a quiet neighborhood, and lived life on his own terms. Until yesterday. His phone began buzzing. Non-stop. Calls. Texts. Unknown numbers. Then a knock at the door. He opened it to find a young man in his 20s, out of breath, holding his phone like it was on fire. "Sir, are you Walter Green?" Walter hesitated. "Depends on who's asking." The man flipped his phone around, showing the paused frame of Walter in mid-motion, disarming one of the bullies. "You're everywhere right now. The world's calling you a hero." Walter's eyes narrowed. He wasn't smiling. "I didn't do it to go viral." "I know," the man said. "But, people need to see stuff like this. Real courage. Real action. Not just talk." Walter didn't respond. He shut the door slowly, leaving the young man standing there, still trying to process what kind of person he had just met. But outside, the world kept spinning. The video had reached over 2 million views by nightfall. News outlets started digging. Former fight fans recognized him. Old footage resurfaced. Commentators began revisiting his career. The Hurricane, they called him again, as if he had never left. But this time, the narrative wasn't about punches or victories in the ring. It was about character. About standing up when no one else would. The young mother, her name was Carla, was overwhelmed. She gave a brief interview, holding her child close, recounting what happened. "I was terrified," she said. "I thought no one was going to help. And then, he was just there. Like he'd been waiting." People online began calling Walter a guardian angel. A protector. The kind of person we all wish would show up when things go wrong. But not everyone was celebrating. The two bullies, now publicly shamed, decided to fight back in the worst way. They posted their own version of the story online, trying to twist the narrative. "We were just having fun," one of them claimed. "That guy assaulted us out of nowhere." But the footage didn't lie. Their tone changed quickly. And their pride was wounded. They wanted revenge. A few days later, Walter walked into his local gym, a quiet, no-frills place where he still did light training to stay active. Nothing fancy. Just a place where sweat met silence, and no one asked too many questions. He was hitting the heavy bag when someone approached him, Marcus, the owner of the gym, and a longtime friend. "Hey, man. I don't know if you've been online lately." Walter grunted. "Not interested." "Well, you should be. Because those guys you put down? They've been talking. A lot." Walter paused. "Let them talk." Marcus hesitated. "I think they're looking for you." Walter finally turned. "Let them find me." It wasn't arrogance. It was acceptance. Walter didn't believe in running from consequences, not his own, and not from others. But what he didn't expect, was that Carla would come to see him the next day. She showed up at the gym's entrance, nervous but determined. Walter noticed her immediately and walked over, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, holding her child tightly. Walter frowned. "Everything okay?" "They've been following me," she whispered. "Those men. I saw one of them outside my apartment yesterday. Just watching." Walter's jaw tightened. "Have you called the police?" "They said unless they do something, there's nothing they can do." "Of course." He knew how that went. Walter looked down at the child, who was holding a small stuffed bear, eyes wide and trusting. Then he looked at Carla, scared, but trying to be strong. He nodded once. "You're not alone." That night, Walter sat in his apartment, staring at the phone. He knew what he had to do. He picked it up and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Jerome?" he said when the voice answered. "It's Walter. I need a favor." Jerome was a former coach. Someone who still had connections in places that mattered. And more importantly, someone who knew how to track people down. The next morning, Walter stood outside Carla's building. Watching. Waiting. And he wasn't alone. He had called in a few old friends. Not fighters, brothers. Men who had trained with him, bled with him, shared locker rooms and sleepless nights on the road. They didn't ask why he called. They just came. By afternoon, one of the bullies showed up. Same cap. Same cocky walk. Only this time, Walter stepped forward before he got close to the building. The man stopped cold. "You shouldn't be here," Walter said. The man smirked. "You think this is over?" "No. I think you're about to realize it never even started. The man's smirk faded as two more men stepped out behind Walter. Calm. Silent. Watching. We're not here to fight, Walter said. We're here to end it. The man looked between them. He wasn't so sure anymore. You're lucky, Walter added. Because if it were me 10 years ago, we'd already be on the ground. He stepped closer. But now? I'd rather teach you something. The man blinked. Confused. You think strength is about dominance. About making people feel small. But real strength. The days that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. Walter returned to his routines. Morning walks. Evening training. Small groceries. No attention, no interruptions. But beneath the surface, something had changed. Not just in him, but in the way people saw him. At the store, people nodded with respect. Some whispered his name. Others thanked him from a distance. Carla sent him a message, a simple, "We're safe. Thank you again." She didn't need to say more. But Walter knew, something had shifted. That night, he stood in front of the mirror in his small apartment, staring at his reflection. The lines on his face told stories of every fight, every loss, every moment where he chose to keep going instead of giving up. But this story, the one no referee witnessed, no bell rang for, meant more than all the others. Because in the end, it wasn't about a fight. It was about a choice. The choice to step forward when it's easier to look away. The choice to protect, not because you have to, but because you can. Walter didn't need an audience. He didn't need to be remembered. But he had shown something the world had nearly forgotten, that strength isn't loud, or flashy, or full of ego. True strength is silent. Steady. And unstoppable. And sometimes, it lives in those the world overlooks. If you're still watching this story, there's a reason. Maybe you're like Walter. Maybe you've been quiet for too long. Maybe you've faced things no one knows about. Maybe, deep down, you've always known, you were meant for more. But somewhere along the way, you stopped believing in your own power. This is your sign to take it back. To stop waiting for the world to change, and start becoming the one who changes it. You don't need to be a fighter. You don't need to be a hero. You just need to choose. And if you're ready to make that choice, not just emotionally, but energetically, then it's time to take a step further. Right now, there's a tool that's changing people's lives by helping them reprogram how they think, feel, and attract what they deserve. It's not magic, it's mindset. Focus. Intention. And it works. You'll find the link in the first pinned comment. Don't wait. Opportunities like this aren't random, they appear when you're finally open to receiving them. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, do one more thing: subscribe to this channel, like this video, and leave a comment sharing what part of the story spoke to you the most. Your voice matters. Because when more people start standing up, like Walter did, the world begins to shift. One choice at a time.